Hi, everyone, and welcome to 5pointsblue.com. I'm Kelsey Charles, joined by Christy Scales and Nita Shrikant. Guys, the Cowboys are coming off of a big win in Washington, finishing the season perfect on the road, 8-0, and with a final season record of 12-4. They also broke and set multiple records when they were in Washington this past weekend. DeMarco Murray, Des Bryant, and even Tony Romo himself having a pretty big game. So we've heard the comparisons all season, but after a full season's worth of work we've seen, is it time to kind of start making the comparisons between the triplets and the teams in the 90s and now?
Well, if they can make a run in the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl, then yes. But until then, the triplets of the 90s have the 3 Super Bowl rings. And so, that's really kind of hard to put Dez and Tony and DeMarco into that category now. But they did have exemplary single seasons for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Christy. The stats are the same right now. Romo just beat out Aikman for the club passing record. DeMarco just passed Emmitt Smith for the single-season rushing yards record, but the main stat that we don't have right now is the Super Bowls, and at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah, and what's interesting, people think about the 90s and they remember the triplets, but what an offensive line the Cowboys had back
absolutely.
then. And now, they had multiple Pro Bowlers, just like the Cowboys have this year. 3 linemen, Travis Frederick, Zach Martin going for the first time, Tyron Smith at left tackle going for the third time. But the other thing is, back in the 1990s, when they were doing so great on offense, the Cowboys had number 1 rated defenses back then, too. And Nita, I know that you have some numbers about how well the defense has been playing, particularly this last month.
Yeah, the last 4 games, defense has 7 interceptions, 9 sacks, and 5 forced fumbles in 4 games, and that's
not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
I mean, we didn't have high expectations for this defense coming out of training camp. They lost Sean Lee back in OTAs, and DeMarcus Lawrence, the second draft pick, was going to be out for a while. So it was a pretty dim sight heading into the season, and obviously they've been able to pull things together. But I think another point too is some of the complementary players, like guys like Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, that have really stepped up too, and even those tight ends as well. I wouldn't call Jason Witten a complimentary player, but you've got Michael Irvin in the 90s, and I didn't cover the team then, but you had also Alvin Harper, so you couldn't ignore those guys.
And Jay Novacek.
Yes, but those guys were there, and
sure.
So I feel like they definitely have some of the pieces, but I'm with you, Christy. I mean, they don't have the records yet, and so I'm looking forward to this team hopefully getting there, but I don't think they're there as of yet. But obviously, I guess we'll wait and see on that.
Yeah, but the greatest thing, just from the perspective of being on the sideline and then being in the locker room, the little bit of time that we have after the game and then during the week, is guys like Jason Witten, Tony Romo, Jeremy Mincy, Orlando Scandrick, trickling down to the young guys. They're not satisfied, 12-4, that's great, but they know that that's not how they're going to be measured. Now that they finally made it to the playoffs, this is, they've got to be accountable, and they're not satisfied. It's what are we going to do now that we made it to postseason?
Even Coach Garrett, too. I mean, if you heard the locker room speech after the game, it was, we need to be our best for the next 5 weeks. It wasn't about Redskins. It's about what do we do now. It's a whole new season.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because this is the first time the Cowboys have made it to the playoffs since 2009. So obviously, finish the fight is a big theme right now. So what's it going to take for this Cowboys team to finish the fight, beat the Lions, and continue a playoff run?
Consistency, I think. I mean, just like Coach Garrett says, doing their job every day, making sure everyone's accountable for everything. And specifically, if you look about what they need to do, pass rush. The pass rush has come alive these past 4 games, and that needs to continue on into the postseason. Defense wins championships.
That's right. And from an offensive standpoint, I think they need to do as they've done throughout the regular season, and that's remain committed to the run game.
Yep.
And that's tough against the Lions defense that's number 1 rated against the run in the league this year. They're allowing, I'm going to round up, but only 64 rushing yards a game.
Well, I think one thing I've heard a lot of talk about is the momentum, and you guys mentioned it too. These players and this coaching staff is not satisfied. I mean, I think if you've looked on DallasCowboys.com and seen some of the Coach Garrett's playoff or his speeches after the game, he's like, take this hat, we've won the division. So proud of you guys. We're going to take a picture, and then I want you to give it to someone else, because our sights are set a little bit higher. And when DeMarco Murray, broke that single-season rushing record of Emmitt Smith, I mean, he's excited. He's like, it's great, but my sights are set a little bit higher. So I think this team is really buying into what Coach Garrett is selling, and and really not being satisfied. I mean, they played their starters all throughout Washington. They kept that momentum going, even when people were like, maybe you should take them out. And obviously, I think Coach Garrett knows his team and knows what works, and it's working. I mean, 12-4 ain't bad.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see how long it's going to take for this "we fence" mantra to catch on with the fans. We fence is what we fence instead of defense. That's what the Cowboys defensive coaches and the defensive players talk about, saying we have 22 starters on this defense, not 11. You know, every man is accountable and every man ready to step up. And so it's a big thing here at Valley Ranch, but now I think with the playoff run, it's really going to start catching on with the fans too.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I guess we'll see how this "we fence" continues to play, and hopefully this entire team will look to finish the fight this weekend when they take on the Lions at 3:40 Central Time on Fox at home here in Arlington, Texas. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That's all we've got time for you all this week. We will be back next week, hopefully, in continuing in the playoffs.
Yeah, in 2015. Happy New Year.
See you next year.